Senior researcher Lara stood before the crystalline observation window, her scaled fingers trembling slightly as she made the final adjustments to her psychic dampeners. The human sat calmly on the other side, apparently unconcerned about being the first of his species to undergo formal psychic evaluation. Subject 117, as their documentation labeled him, was reading a book, an actual physical book, the kind Lara had only seen in historical archives. Recording begins, Cycle 847, First Contact Protocol, she spoke into her comm unit. Subject is human male, designation 117, volunteer for initial psychic compatibility assessment. The dampeners hummed softly against her temples, their familiar vibration usually reassuring. Today, they felt inadequate. Something about the human's casual posture made her nervous, though she couldn't explain why. The previous 3 species they'd evaluated had required no such precautions, but Command had insisted on maximum safety protocols for humanity. Lara initiated the standard connection sequence, extending her consciousness toward the human's mind. The first touch was always the most delicate part. Many species experience discomfort or confusion at the initial contact. But Subject 117 didn't flinch. He didn't even look up from his book. That should have been her first warning. The initial scan revealed expected surface thoughts, curiosity about the procedure, slight hunger. The human's metabolism was remarkably fast, and Lara paused. There was something else. Something deeper. Like a vast ocean beneath a sheet of ice. Subject's mind shows unusual depth structure, she noted. Proceeding with secondary scan. Lara pushed deeper, past the surface thoughts, into what should have been the standard memory architecture all sentient species shared. Instead, she found herself in what felt like an endless library, stretching in all directions. Books flew past her mental presence, their pages fluttering open to reveal not just memories, but dreams, fears, hopes, entire worlds of imagination. This is unprecedented, she managed to say, her voice shaking. The complexity of the subject's mental landscape exceeds all known parameters. She should have stopped there. Protocol demanded it. But Lara had built her career on pushing boundaries, on understanding the unknown. She pressed deeper. The library dissolved, replaced by something far more terrifying, a vast neural network, pulsing with energy she couldn't comprehend. Each connection sparked with potential, with possibilities that shouldn't exist in a species so young. She saw warfare and peace, creation and destruction, love and hatred, all intertwined in patterns that defied her understanding. And then she saw them. The gods. Not the simple deities of her people, but beings of terrible magnificence, born from humanity's collective imagination. Thousands of them. Millions. Gods of war and wisdom, of creation and destruction, of mercy and vengeance. Each one a construct of human belief, yet somehow more real than anything Lara had encountered in her years of psychic research. They turned their attention to her. The dampeners screamed in protest. Lara tried to withdraw, but something held her there. The human, Subject 117, had finally looked up from his book. He was staring directly at her through the observation window, and he was smiling. Fascinating, isn't it? His voice echoed in her mind. We wondered when someone would look deep enough to see them. Lara's emergency protocols kicked in, forcibly severing the connection. She stumbled backward, her scales pale with terror. The human was still smiling, but now she could see what she'd missed before, the weight of centuries in his eyes, the knowledge of things that should not be. Emergency log, she gasped into her comm. Subject displays Class X psychic architecture. Recommend immediate quarantine and, she stopped, realizing with growing horror that her dampeners were still active, yet she could still hear him. We've been waiting a long time to meet others like us, Subject 117's voice whispered in her mind. Though perhaps like us isn't quite accurate. You've only just begun to touch the surface of what consciousness can be. We've had millennia to explore its depths. Lara slammed her hand on the emergency shutdown, plunging the observation room into darkness. But she could still see him through the window, illuminated by lights that shouldn't exist, his shadow casting impossible shapes on the wall behind him. "Complete evacuation of Facility 7, she ordered, her voice steady despite her terror. "Priority 1 containment protocols. And get me the High Council. They need to know." She paused, watching as Subject 117 returned to his book, once again appearing completely ordinary. But now she knew better. Now she had seen what humanity truly was, not just another species, but something else entirely. Something that had been patiently waiting to be discovered, wearing the mask of civilization over powers that defied comprehension. "They need to know," she whispered, "that we're not the ones doing the evaluating. We never were." The High Council chamber was unusually dark, its bioluminescent walls dimmed to match the somber mood of its occupants. Counselor Zexstar studied the holographic displays floating before the gathered assembly, each showing a different psychic researcher in various states of distress. The latest was barely an hour old, another experienced researcher reduced to babbling about impossible gods and unfathomable depths. 17, he announced to the chamber. 17 of our most qualified psychic researchers, all reporting the same phenomenon. All after attempting to probe human minds. The chamber erupted in whispers. Senior researcher Lara, still pale from her own encounter 3 days ago, stood silently in the witness circle. She hadn't slept since her experience with Subject 117, though not for lack of trying. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those vast libraries, those impossible gods, those knowing smiles. "The humans claim ignorance," Council Leader Marval stated, her crystalline head crest pulsing with concern. "Their diplomatic team insists they have no knowledge of these abilities." "They're lying," snapped Subdirector Krell, his scales flushed with anger. "No species could possess such power without being aware of it." Lara stepped forward, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "With respect, Subdirector, I believe they're telling the truth. What I saw in their minds, it's not something they created deliberately. It's something they became." The council chamber's darkness seemed to deepen at her words. Lara continued, knowing she needed to make them understand. "Imagine a species that spent millennia dreaming, creating, believing. Each generation adding to a vast collective unconscious, building gods and monsters, heroes and devils, entire universes of possibility. They didn't do it on purpose. They did it because that's what they are, creators, dreamers, believers. And now those dreams have become real," Marval finished, her crest dimming. "Or real enough to affect our psychics. Worse," Lara said. "They're becoming aware of it." Subject 117. He knew. "Not at first, but the moment I touched those deeper levels, it was like I awakened something. Something that's been waiting." New holograms appeared, showing data from human population centers. Subtle energy readings that hadn't made sense before now formed a pattern that sent chills through the chamber. "They're connecting," Zexstar observed, his scientific curiosity temporarily overriding his fear. "Every human mind, linked in ways we never detected because we weren't looking for it. We thought their planet's background psychic noise was just that, noise. But it's them. All of them, dreaming together. The quarantine must be maintained," Krell insisted. "We can't risk." He was interrupted by a priority alert. The chamber's central hologram shifted to show a human diplomatic vessel requesting emergency docking clearance at the station. The message was brief but clear: they knew what had been done to their people, and they were coming to discuss terms. Lara felt it first, a tremor in the psychic atmosphere that made her dampeners whine in protest. The humans weren't just coming to talk. They were coming with the full weight of their awakened potential, their collective consciousness focused on this moment, this meeting. "They're not angry," she realized aloud, drawing surprised looks from the council. "They're excited. They've been waiting for this. waiting for someone to see them as they truly are. Marval rose from her seat, her decision evident in her posture. Then we will meet them as equals. Or at least, we will try. Vielara, you will join the reception team. You've seen what they are, help us understand what they might become. As the council chamber emptied, Vielara lingered, watching the approaching human ship on the holographic display. She could feel them now, even through her dampeners, billions of minds dreaming together, their collective imagination reshaping reality itself. And at the center of it all, she sensed Subject 117, still smiling that knowing smile. We thought we were studying them, she murmured to the empty chamber. But they were waiting for us to study ourselves, to see our own potential through their eyes. The human ship docked, and with it came a new chapter in galactic history, one where the dreams of humanity would either lift all species to new heights or drown them in the vast ocean of human consciousness. And somewhere in the depths of those collective dreams, the gods of humanity watched, and waited, and smiled. The diplomatic chamber aboard Station Nexus 7 had never felt smaller. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat calmly at one end of the luminescent table, her presence somehow filling the space more than the dozen Zarkax officials opposite her. Behind her stood Subject 117, now properly introduced as Dr. Marcus Reed, still carrying that same book he'd had during the initial tests. Vielara, seated beside Council Leader Marval, couldn't stop her scales from shimmering with anxiety. Even with her dampeners at maximum power, she could feel the subtle pressure of human consciousness filling the room like an invisible tide. Let's address the obvious, Ambassador Chen began, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to resonate on multiple levels. You've been probing our minds without consent. We want to know why. Marval's crest flickered with diplomatic patterns. Standard first contact protocols. All species undergo basic psychological evaluation for compatibility. No, Dr. Reed interrupted, closing his book. You weren't evaluating compatibility. You were looking for weapons. Advantages. Things you could use or defend against. Instead, you found us. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Vielara watched as Reed placed his book on the table. She could finally see its title, Collected Works of Carl Jung. The sight of it sent a shiver through her scales. What you don't understand, Chen continued, is that you've accelerated a process we've been undergoing for millennia. Your psychic probes acted as a catalyst, bringing our collective unconscious closer to the surface. We can feel it now, all of us. The connection that was always there. Holograms sprang to life around the table, showing real-time data from human population centers. The patterns Vielara had noticed before were stronger now, more organized. Billions of human minds reaching toward each other, forming structures that defied conventional psychic theory. Impossible, Subdirector Krell muttered. The energy requirements alone. Impossible? Reed smiled that unsettling smile again. We've been imagining the impossible for as long as we've existed. We've dreamed up countless worlds, infinite possibilities. We've created and destroyed universes in our fiction, our art, our myths. And all of that, every story, every dream, every god and monster and hero, it's all still there, in our collective consciousness. Vielara felt it then, a shift in the psychic atmosphere as Reed relaxed whatever barriers he'd been maintaining. The pressure in the room intensified, and suddenly she could see them again. The vast libraries of human imagination, the neural networks of shared consciousness, and those watching gods, now more defined, more present than ever. Several Zarkax officials stumbled back from the table. Marval's crest went completely dark. Only Vielara managed to maintain her composure, though her dampeners were screaming in protest. We're not here to threaten you, Ambassador Chen said softly, though her words carried the weight of billions of human minds. We're here to invite you to understand. Humanity isn't just waking up, we're remembering what we've always been. And we want to share that journey. Share it? Vielara found herself asking. How? Reed opened his book again, but now Lara could see that its pages contained not just text, but shifting images, possibilities, doorways into the human collective unconscious. Your people have been scanning minds, looking for threats or advantages. But you never tried to really connect, to share consciousness, to dream together. Because it's dangerous, Krell protested. The psychic feedback alone could awaken something in your own species. Chen suggested. Could show you that you're capable of more than you imagined. That's exactly what we're offering. Marval rose slowly, her crest beginning to pulse with curious patterns. You're suggesting an exchange. Not just of knowledge or technology, but of dreams, Reed finished. Possibilities. The courage to imagine something more. That's what humanity does best, we dream, and we make those dreams real. And now we can show you how. Lara watched as understanding dawned across the faces of her fellow Zarkax. This wasn't a negotiation about territory or resources or even power. It was an invitation to evolution itself, offered by a species that had accidentally dreamed itself into godhood. The question now was whether they were ready to dream alongside humanity, or if the price of such dreams would prove too high to bear. Reed's book lay open on the table, its pages now glowing with inner light, waiting for a decision that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of consciousness itself. And in the vast ocean of human collective imagination, billions of minds held their breath, waiting to see if they would dream alone or together. The meditation chambers of the High Temple had never witnessed anything like this before. Lara sat in the center of a circle of 20 Zarkax volunteers, their scales shimmering with anticipation. Across from her, Dr. Reed and Ambassador Chen sat in perfect stillness, while hundreds of biomonitors tracked every neural fluctuation in the room. Remember, Chen's voice was gentle but firm, this isn't about forcing a connection. It's about learning to dream together. The last 3 days had been a blur of preparation and debate. After the revelation in the diplomatic chamber, the High Council had spent 48 hours in emergency session before agreeing to a controlled experiment, voluntary consciousness sharing between selected Zarkax and human guides. Lara's dampeners lay deactivated beside her, the first time she'd removed them since her initial encounter with Reed. The fear was still there, but now mixed with something else, hope. Begin the link, she instructed her fellow volunteers. As one, they extended their consciousness toward the humans, no longer trying to probe or analyze, but to connect. The first touch was like stepping into warm water. Reed's consciousness met theirs halfway, providing structure to what could have been chaos. Through him, they felt the edges of human collective unconscious, not forcing entry, but inviting exploration. Show us, Lara whispered, both aloud and mentally. Show us how to dream. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Through Reed and Chen's guidance, they experienced fragments of human imagination, the birth of stars and death of galaxies, heroes battling impossible odds, lovers separated by time itself, children taking their first steps on distant worlds. Each story, each dream, each hope and fear was a thread in an infinite tapestry of consciousness. But something else was happening. As they learned to navigate the sea of human dreams, the Zarkax volunteers began to feel their own consciousness expanding. Ancient memories, buried in their species' collective past, began to surface. We had this once, one of the volunteers gasped. Before the great rationalization, before we chose pure logic over imagination. We used to dream like this. Lara saw it too, glimpses of her species' past, when the Zarkax had been dreamers themselves, before they deemed such things inefficient and dangerous. Their own gods, their own stories, their own infinite possibilities, all carefully buried beneath millennia of rational thought. The biomonitors began screaming as new patterns emerged. The Zarkax weren't just sharing human dreams. They were remembering how to create their own. That's it, Reed encouraged, his consciousness a steady anchor in the psychic storm. Don't fight it. Remember who you were. Remember who you could be. The temple's crystalline walls began to pulse with uncontrolled light as 20 Zarkak's minds truly awakened for the first time in thousands of years. Vielara felt her consciousness expanding, touching not just human dreams but the dreams of her own people, past, present, and possible futures. Reality itself seemed to flutter around them as ancient Zarkak's gods stirred from their long slumber, called back into being by minds that finally remembered how to believe. The barriers between imagination and reality, between thought and being, became increasingly fluid. Emergency in the High Temple, she heard someone shouting from far away. Unknown energy signatures. Let them come, Ambassador Chen's voice cut through the chaos, both physical and mental. This is what evolution looks like. This is what happens when species remember how to dream. Vielara opened her eyes to see the impossible. The temple chamber had transformed, its walls now showing not just light but moving images from both human and Zarkak's consciousness. The other volunteers were surrounded by auras of shifting colors, their scales patterns telling stories that hadn't been told in millennia. And there, in the center of it all, Reed sat with his book open, its pages now blank. "You don't need our stories anymore," he said softly. "You're ready to write your own again." The implications were staggering. The Zarkaks hadn't just learned to touch human consciousness, they'd remembered their own capacity for unbounded imagination. And as Vielara felt the first stirrings of her species' reawakened potential, she knew that nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The age of pure logic was ending. The age of shared dreams was about to begin. 6 months after the temple awakening, the galaxy was still adjusting to its new reality. Vielara stood in the newly constructed dream nexus, watching as streams of consciousness flowed through the vast chamber like rivers of light. Human and Zarkak's minds intertwined in elaborate patterns, creating and exploring realities that defied conventional physics. "The Centauri delegation arrives tomorrow," Ambassador Chen said, materializing beside her. Whether physically or as a mental projection, it was becoming increasingly difficult to tell. "They've seen what's happening. They want to join the dreaming." Vielara nodded, her scales now permanently iridescent with the marks of awakened consciousness. The news wasn't surprising. Word had spread quickly after the first successful melding of human and Zarkak's minds. Other species had watched in wonder and fear as both civilizations transformed. Cities on both worlds had become fluid things, reshaping themselves according to their inhabitants' collective will. The boundary between thought and reality had grown permeable, though not without rules and structures to prevent chaos. It turned out that when everyone could shape reality, the desire for stability became a powerful governing force. "We're receiving transmissions from deep space," Reed added, stepping through what appeared to be a door in empty air. His book was gone now, he no longer needed such tokens to focus his power. New patterns in the background radiation of the universe. We think we're not the first to achieve this state." Vielara touched one of the consciousness streams, feeling the billions of minds flowing through it. "The ancient signals, they're like calls across time. Other species who achieved what we have." "More than that," Chen smiled. "We think they're invitations. The universe itself might be one vast shared dream, and we're finally learning how to join it properly." The implications made Vielara's mind spin. She remembered the gods she'd first seen in human minds, but now understood they were just fragments of something far larger. Every species had the potential for this evolution, this awakening to the true nature of consciousness and reality. In the center of the dream nexus, a new structure was taking shape, created by the combined will of millions of minds. A tower that existed in multiple realities simultaneously, designed to reach toward those ancient signals from the stars. "The coalition is concerned," Vielara noted, referring to the alliance of species that had yet to embrace the awakening. "They're talking about quarantine zones, reality stabilization fields." Reed's expression showed understanding rather than concern. "They're afraid, just as your people once were. Fear of losing control, of changing too fundamentally. But they're also curious. Their own dreamers are already reaching out, feeling the edges of what's possible. It's only a matter of time. Above them, the Nexus dome had become transparent, showing not just the physical stars but the layers of reality that had always existed beyond normal perception. Networks of consciousness stretched between solar systems, dreams bridging the vast distances of space. We never imagined this, Lara said softly, when we first tried to study human minds. We thought we were the teachers, the advanced species. Instead, you helped us remember what we really are, Chen finished. All of us, humans, Zarkax, every species in the galaxy, were all part of something larger. A cosmic dream slowly waking up to itself. The tower in the center of the Nexus pulsed, sending out its first transmission to the ancient signals in deep space. The message was simple: we are dreaming too. We are ready to join you. As Lara watched the message ripple out through multiple layers of reality, she understood that this wasn't an ending but a beginning. Humanity hadn't just changed her species, they had opened a door that would never fully close. The age of singular, limited consciousness was over. They were all becoming something new, something that transcended individual species and minds. Not gods, exactly, but perhaps something closer to what gods were always meant to be, dreamers capable of shaping reality itself, bound together by shared imagination in the infinite possibilities of consciousness. The stars seemed to shine brighter, as if responding to this understanding. In the space between thoughts and reality, between dreams and waking, the universe itself seemed to be smiling. The dream was finally waking up to itself, and every consciousness in the galaxy was invited to be part of its awakening.